So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is a rather warming sight, to be honest, because it's been a while since we played on any of these seen any of the standard settlements in one of these battle replays, which, again, it feels like it was a lot more common back in the earlier days of the channel because there was simply fewer custom maps around, so it was kind of necessary if you wanted a lot of siege battles to play on maps like this. But obviously anyone who has played Medieval 2 in any capacity in the campaigns will be fully aware of these kind of settlement layouts, and yeah, it's nice to see them again, honestly. And we do actually have a bit of a theme to this battle as well. The forces of evil have already conquered this settlement, but the forces of good are going to be coming to root them out and reclaim what is theirs. Bit of a theme going on actually, because at least one other battle we'll have coming up has also got evil on the defence, so it's kind of running contrary to what we usually see. We'll see how well evil are able to defend these settlements in comparison. These kind of settlements, depending on where you stand, can either be very, very good for the defenders to hold on, or if you make some errors in terms of where you choose to post up, it can be quite punishing. But again, that's kind of true with any siege map, but the custom ones, there is often a very clear method to how the defenders are supposed to approach it. But with these more standard settlements, there are a number of things that you can do, and of course the walls themselves are one such problem. On most custom maps, of course, you cannot simply knock a bunch of holes in the wall and add extra positions that the defenders need to try and defend. But that is the case on these, so we shall see if that is how the attackers choose to approach things, because it is probably the best way to handle business. Irregardless, we will be going through the attacking armies first and foremost, as we usually do, starting off with, well, the Womb Raider is the player who sent me this battle replay, so a big thank you to him. He is going to be playing as one of the Arnorian petty kingdoms that are coming to reclaim their land in Cardolan. Minhiriath spearmen are very functional as far as spears go. I mean, when you're on the attack and you have an army advantage like this in a 3v5, you're going to have to rely on your rank and file units to do the business, and you could do far worse than sort of Western kingdoms of men and their spears and line infantry, because they are very dependable. They're not going to win you the battle per se, but they are a very important part in your forward momentum. You can't rely on the same kind of numbers that the orcs can, but individually they are going to be able to keep themselves alive a little bit better, and they are going to perform a little bit better in melee as well. One problem Cardolan do have, that we mentioned time and time again, is morale, and when they're on the attack in a situation like this, that can be a real problem, especially for units like the mercenaries. Those who fight for gold are not going to stick around and die for the cause after all, if they can help it. They do make up for this somewhat, however, by being mace men, so we've already caught a glimpse of Isengard being on the defence today. Armour piercing will most certainly come in handy against them, and indeed against pretty much any orcish faction, to be fair. So if you can keep the morale of these guys in check, they should be an efficient kind of unit. Thieves of Tharbad, hidden in the grass here. Thieves of Tharbad, of course, got those throwing projectiles. They're pretty effective in melee against most foes they fight as well, but they are very much glass cannons, both in terms of arrow fire and as if they're going up against a pretty high quality unit as well, they do struggle to stay alive in pure melee terms too. But that is the price you pay, essentially. They are a damaging unit, but they are a bit flash in the pan. We shall see if in a siege battle like this they can be used effectively. It will be fairly difficult. The Greenway units are one area in which Cardolan can bulk out their numbers a little bit, and the Greenway Garrison Spearmen may not be able to do much damage at all in melee to enemy infantry, but they do make for a decent tar pit. Their defensive values as far as spears of this level go are actually pretty good, but especially their shield value, which makes them pretty resilient to arrow fire, and that is one of the main things that you want to be doing as the attackers, absorbing that ranged punishment which the defenders are inevitably going to be trying to give to you. Spearmen, men-at-arms, we've already talked about spearmen. The men-at-arms are very much the same sort of thing, but with a sword instead. One thing Cardolan, of course, have got in their favour is their affinity for crossbows. Minhiriath sharpshooters are also armour-piercing in melee, of course, so a very good all-around unit to bring in a situation such as this. If you can claim the walls and get a unit of crossbows up on them to start shooting down into enemy positions on any map, that's going to be advantageous for you. Very difficult for the defenders to come back from it if you manage to do it effectively, so Cardolan will be looking to do that, I'm sure. We do have some Greenway Garrison footmen who are already in place here, getting ready to brace with their pikes. I mean, pikes are going to be important, as I always say. Late game pikes in a siege like this, whether attackers or defenders, if you have an edge in this way, it's very, very difficult to get around that. I would imagine the Greenway Garrison footmen will probably be committed a little bit earlier than that, but they are very fragile to arrow fire, unlike their spear brethren in front of them. We have some Dunedain Rangers, some Bandits, and some Lumbermen, so again, all pretty fragile, but especially the Dunedain Rangers can be absolutely devastating again. Attackers will find it more difficult to get their rangers into really, really dangerous positions, but if they can manage it, it's pretty much a death sentence for the defenders. Civilians, of course, we have a catapult. It's going to be one of those things which you can really take advantage of on one of these more standard settlements because you can knock so many holes in the wall, like I said. And we have some Minotaur Roman gatekeepers here at the back, which of course are just a beefier crossbow unit, armour upgrade, halberdier. What much more could you want? Now then, the second attacking army we have over here is looking like an Arthedainian one based on the colour scheme, and indeed it is, played by DF Mark. He has got some Dunedain scouts. Interesting to bring standard horse archers to a battlefield such as this. Maybe if the defenders do come out and try and attack you with wargs and sallying forth, this is the kind of unit that can be used to counter them, not quickly, because you'd have to kite them around and the wargs could just then try and ignore you and charge into your infantry, but then you run the risk of them not being efficient, I suppose. Knights of Innuminus, Wardens of the North, Troll Slayers that are hidden, Arthedain Marksmen. Looks like a fairly standard fair Arthedain army. There's maybe not quite as much in the way of armour upgrades as we're used to. Arthedain Men-at-Arms are here, plenty of pikes. We've got some Gate Guards, which are a higher end pike unit, could be very useful in the late game for the reasons I've already mentioned. Civilians as well, and there's also the dismounted Fornost Knights, so could be a few more hidden Dunedain. No artillery, which is quite interesting, but then again there may be caps on such things. The second of these attacking armies, we have Winged Swordsman 44 once again, a part of many of the battle replays of late, a very active player lately, though of course didn't send me this one on this occasion, but it does not matter. We've got some Wardens of the North, some dismounted Knights, Arthedain Pikemen with the armour upgrades as well. Got some more dismounted Fornost Knights, maybe a little bit more of a high quality look to this Arthedain army in comparison to Mark's. Also more armour upgrades going on, which will make them individually more resilient to the punishment the defenders will inevitably want to mete out. Got some Arthedain Men-at-Arms, Troll Slayers and some Arthedain Marksmen. There's also Rangers hidden as well, so plenty of dangerous units for the defenders to be concerned about. Then we have Darthy Darth, who is playing as another Cardolan army, maybe a little bit more of a Greenway look to this army as well, with more spears. We've got some Greenway Garrison archers as well, so maybe going for a little bit more of a skirmishing approach. The fortress can make that a little bit less of a viable strategy than it otherwise would be. There are siege maps where the attackers can really make use of their own archers to skirmish with the enemy for long lengths of time, but unless you can get up onto the walls, that's a little bit more difficult to do for the attackers on this occasion. And if you can get up onto the walls, you'd probably be better off doing so with your crossbows rather than your archers on this occasion. But still, it does make for a different strategy than the one that the Wound Raider is going for. More Minhiriath spears. He's also gone for some Hearthguard of Amon Sul, so again a little bit more evidence of a slightly more archer-centric army this. Hearthguard are also very, very tanky spearmen in melee, of course. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers and Sharpshooters are still here, so more ranged units all around. And also we've got 2 units of the very scary upgraded Dunedain captains as well, and then the Tharbad Warhammers with that armour piercing, exactly the sort of thing which is going to be giving URUK-HAI nightmares with their armour piercing abilities. And finally we have Froggy. Good to see Froggy again, and he is going to be playing as the Hobbit folk. Definitely a tricky faction to get to grips with if you're facing off against them. Plenty of armour piercing, plenty of units that can be quite tricksy if you're having to attack into them, but the Hobbits attacking a settlement like this, it doesn't really play into their strength, so if they can be bottled up, I don't think the defenders will mind too much that they're going up against a faction such as this. Longbottom mob, battling Brandybucks, all armour piercing of course, Hobbitry and arms are as well, but other than that they're a very low tier spearmen. Farmers of Buckland are actually a very dangerous armour piercing unit, mostly because of the charge though, which is more difficult on a map such as this, especially if they're the ones manning the siege towers. Hobbitry in arms, obviously the Proudfoot Protectors I've mentioned several times, probably the most effective unit the Hobbits have overall. They may only be single HP, but they do have pikes, crossbows at range. Crossbows definitely the sort of thing which both attackers and defenders will be hoping to dominate in this battle, given the presence of Isengard on the defence. But yeah, 3 Proudfoot Protectors going into the rev limit, but as I've said with the Hobbits before, I think that it's well worth it to go into the red for a unit such as this, especially if you're on the attack as the Hobbits, because they are really the best thing for you. You can fall back onto their pikes, or you can utilise them for their crossbows, as you will. Now then, for the defenders, we shall start off. They're probably all going to be mixed together, to be fair. I think it might just be an entirely Isengard force. Tommy the Wise here has got some champions of the White Hand. He's going to be able to sally out. It's going to be potentially dangerous for the attackers, but this is where their abundance of crossbows will come in handy, because you can really keep them at arm's length and do a lot of damage very quickly with crossbows to a unit such as this, and it's an expensive unit to lose for nothing. So I don't think he has much of a choice though but to commit them early, because bottling them up in this kind of settlement I don't think will work. Saving them for the late game, not a particularly great idea, I think. Half-Orc Spearguard will make a decent buffer for units like the URUK-HAI Pikemen, which are going to be here in very high numbers, I would imagine, going to be one of the mainstays of the defending force, as will of course the URUK-HAI Infantry, that classic three-way axis of URUK-HAI Infantry, URUK-HAI Pikemen and URUK-HAI Crossbowmen who are in there as well. A few URUK-HAI Archers. I mean, archery is not really the sort of thing Isengard are most well known for, but they can engage in it. URUK-HAI Archers will be happy to skirmish with the enemy and just play tag with the Cardolan and Arthedainian archers, although of course the crossbow war is going to be the most important one. Trolls of the White Hand, if they can be used at the right time, they can do an awful lot of damage, especially to some of the more low damage basic Arthedain and Cardolan spears, even against the armour piercing of the hobbits, depending upon how, well, if it's against the spear hobbits then they'll do pretty well, but against stuff like Farmers of Buckland they might be cut down rather quickly. We also have Diego Rio Ramos, who is another player playing as Isengard, got some Guards of Orthanc and some Berserkers up on the wall right away. Well, there's only one artillery piece on the attack, so that is something, so the walls won't be completely crumpled, but they do still need to be a little bit careful, just in case they're stood upon the wall that is being focused. Scouts of Entertainment is, I can't remember the last time I did a battle with Scouts as part of it. Should be an interesting one. We shall see how things go. URUK-HAI Infantry, got some URUK-HAI Pikemen as well. I mean, Isengard are a very... You know what to expect from Isengard. Plenty of Pikes, plenty of Infantry, like I said. Got some URUK-HAI Raiders in there as well as Reavers, so some of the more leather-clad URUK-HAI, more numerous perhaps, helping to bolster the numbers of the defenders. And I suppose that is going to be the play here for Isengard, simply have high numbers anchored by those pikes to keep the the attackers I should say, in place, and then bombard them with crossbow bolts. That would be the standard Isengard way to do it. We've got these guys who are very densely packed up here on the gatehouse, eager for the battle ahead. Lurt's hunting pack is going to be one of the units which could decide this battle after all. Isengard, I may have said that archery isn't really something they're too big on, but the Lurt's hunting pack are a unit of rangers, and those body-piercing projectiles, absolutely vicious, and can be a real turning point in any battle for the defenders. URUK-HAI Crossbows, Infantry, we've got the URUK-HAI here, the single scariest unit of Isengard Infantry, going to be effective against quite a lot of the upper end units that both Arthedain and Cardolan are capable of bringing to the table. Crossbows, I mean, URUK-HAI Reavers offering a bit of lower tier armour piercing as well. Another unit of URUK-HAI, URUK-HAI Infantry, as we see down there. There's actually another unit of Champions of the White Hand, Snaga Skirmishers, Guards of Orthanc, and Lurt's Hunting Pack. Similar armies all round, you'd have to say. A catapult back here in the town centre with some crossbows and another unit of URUK-HAI. So, yeah, all three of the defending armies are quite similar, but you'd expect it from Isengard. You'd expect them to go for a bit of armour piercing, big block of pikes and infantry, and then obviously the ranged units which you need in a defensive siege like this. But crossbows, and especially that catapult, if they position it correctly, could make life very painful for the attackers. But we'll see. These siege battles can be quite dynamic with how much room the attackers have to move into. It's going to be interesting to see how Isengard stack up against that. But without further ado, let's get this show on the road, shall we? So of course, one thing to note with these settlements that came from base Medieval 2 is the fact that the arrow towers almost certainly work, so that's something else that the defenders will have going for them as well. They never tend to rack up huge kill counts over the course of a battle, but it's certainly the sort of thing which prevents the attackers from dawdling too long within their sights, because every soldier is going to be important on the push through the city streets. The Shire, on the other hand, a little bit further away, so not quite in range of the arrow towers just yet. But Tommy the Wise is also going to be putting his own archers up on the wall to do a bit of damage to them on the approach, which should be the most effective way of dealing with the folk from the Shire. And the Cardolan army also going over here, a little bit less room to work with. Maybe they will also wrap around this wall over here. This type of settlement also can't really attack from this angle because of the lakes and the cliffs that block your advance. So while there is a fair amount of surface area, it doesn't completely go around the entirety of the settlement, so that's worth bearing in mind as the battle goes along. No units being sent up onto the walls just yet from Isengard over here. Very content to allow the arrow towers to do their thing for the time being. I think the arrow towers often do actually more efficiently than, more effectively I should say, than killing units is actually destroying siege towers. Now that's not going to be too much of a problem here I don't think, because Cardolan have so many siege towers that losing one to flame would not be too much of a problem I don't think, but even still. Yes, and they are going to Oh, that's a little bit of a weird model, isn't it? Must be something to do with the Gondorian walls. Little glitch in the system there. But yes, a good idea to start peeling down as many of those walls as possible. Need as many ways into the settlement as you can, and going on foot is a little better, I feel, than siege towers. Meanwhile, champions of the White Hand are coming out here, taking a little bit of damage already, but charging into these spears and sallying out with their cavalry like this is the only thing you can really do with the champions of the White Hand. Like I said, there's no real sense in saving them until later. This is a settlement in which you'll very easily be bottled up. A couple more sections of wall down would be a good thing for the attackers, I think. But having said that, going after the Greenway Garrison Spearmen might not be the best use of their time, purely because they're just not actually that strong. Battling Brandy Bucks, the rest of the unit is still a long way away from the actual Bram itself. Projectiles coming in now as well. Greenway Garrison Archers won't be the sort of thing which cause too much trouble for the champions though. It would be the crossbows that would be more of a worry. Hobbits making the walls. So far the Wound Raider is the one to have made the quickest progress, but then he was also right next to his gate and has got a lot more room to work with in comparison to the Hobbits and Arthedain in the other positions. My Garrison Spearmen ready to move in at a moment's notice, but they probably will wait until everyone is all stacked up. DF marks Arthedain army moving that way. Both the Arthedain armies actually are taking this way around, which is interesting. I mean, I suppose there's more walls to work with over here. Yeah, there you can see this is the problem with leaving your siege towers just stock still in front of the arrow towers like this. This is the sort of thing which will happen to more of them. It's a good thing that no units are actually inside it though. That would be a bit of a catastrophe. More walls being destroyed, maybe a little bit close to one another. Spreading things out a little bit might be the way to go, but the first ones within the settlement itself are actually going to be some hobbits, some hobbitry and arms getting up on the walls, engaging the URUK-HAI archers in melee. Not great for Tommy the Wise, this. URUK-HAI archers are pretty poor in melee. Maybe this is a result of him still microing his champions, the White Hand, outside the walls, but you can see how well that's going. I mean, yes, they've managed to do some decent damage here to a unit of bandits. We've also got scouts as champions of the White Hand out here. I mean, going after the Proudfoot Protectors would be a worthwhile endeavour. That initial charge will do a lot of damage, but you will obviously pay for it very soon afterwards because of the pikes they wield in melee, and also a lot of projectiles coming in. Very, very quick damage done there. Maybe not worth it in the long run. It is if you can do very significant damage to the Proudfoots, because they represent such a threat to you in the interior of the settlement, but I mean, the Champions of the White Hand are such an expensive unit that you need to use them cost effectively, otherwise you're not going to be in for a particularly good time of it. The Hobbits still claiming the walls, so still not too eager to contest the walls directly here. I mean, you can see that the URUK-HAI infantry and Trolls of the White Hand are now chasing the Hobbitry and arms along the walls as a result of the URUK-HAI archers now retreating. More Hobbitry and arms being sent forward. Froggy so far seems to be the only one who's sour though. Catapult going through the gap in the wall that was already made, and good hits landed on the URUK-HAI infantry. Catapult already very, very close after all. Winged Swordsman's army moving forwards, getting ready to join with his allies in the attack. Still the characteristic twang of the arrow towers, something that they do need to be cognizant of here, the attackers. They can't afford to just take all the time in the world, otherwise they will start to prove to be a little bit more decisive than they normally are. URUK-HAI infantry controls the White Hand, working together to completely overwhelm a small section of the Hobbitry and arms that was sent onto the walls. What's going on here? My Garrison archers trying to balloon their shots over the wall, but it's not going to do a great deal of damage. It's not the sort of thing that Isengard will be too concerned with. They will be a little bit more concerned if the Minhiriath sharpshooters start shooting directly through the gates into the guards of Orthanc, however. That's the sort of thing which will get them to move a little bit more. URUK-HAI pikes trying to move a little bit to avoid at least a few more of those shots. You can see here some rousing hobbitry and arms. Very neat and tidy they are too. Routing in single file as they are, but I mean this isn't the most surprising thing in the world. Froggy trying to get up onto the walls and contest them, but this is only really something I think you should be doing when your allies are fully ready to do the same. Because Isengard have really squashed a few units of basic hobbit spears very quickly and easily, as you would expect, given the level Isengard operate in regards to their infantry. Over here, meanwhile, I'm going to see, actually seeing a bit of a counter-attack here. The opportunity Scout sees to try and deal with that catapult. I mean, this is all well and good, but I don't think he's going to be able to kill off the catapult crew, and that means that these URUK-HAI infantry are ultimately going to be torn asunder once they come outside the walls. It was a worthwhile endeavour, but stuff like Thieves of Tharbad doing damage. I mean, there were infantry units ready to block the infantry's advance as well. I mean, they'll do very well against Greenway Garrison Spearmen, something a little bit more heavy duty. I mean, the Merc Guildsmen coming in now to add their armour piercing to the mix. The URUK-HAI infantry are trying to retreat, but they may end up breaking as a result. One of the units is breaking, so they'll be back to the town centre, but still a worthy attempt, but in the end this has worked out quite nicely for the attackers because they've managed to kill off more URUK-HAI that would otherwise be present within the walls. One troll of the White Hand right in the middle of all of these hobbitry and arms, who are only shaken despite being sandwiched between URUK-HAI infantry and having a troll in their ranks. No longer having a troll in their ranks, the armour piercing does come in handy against such foes. Still arrows being sent over the walls. Again, the hobbits the only ones really pressurising. Darthy Darth not too eager to go into the settlement just yet. Bringing down the main gate is something that will need to be done first. URUK-HAI crossbowmen moving forwards. Elsewhere, I mean this is something as well. The arrow towers doing their thing against the catapults now as well, so Cardolan have all the more reason to not dawdle any longer. Snaga skirmishers, URUK-HAI infantry taking hits from the troll slayers. Is that really what the troll slayers are going after? Snaga skirmishers. Surely it's the URUK-HAI infantry that were retreating. Yeah, I was going to say this is a little bit more like it. You want to be going after, at the very least, armoured targets with your troll slayers. It's not the sort of losses that Isengard can afford to take too much of either. They are the defenders after all, so perhaps the attackers can afford to be a bit more laissez-faire with the troll slayers that they have available to them. Greenway Garrison Spearmen moving in, dealing with a very depleted unit of URUK-HAI infantry, but some raiders will be coming in as well to help with that. Still no movement up on that wall or those siege towers just yet, but we are starting now to see these fights take shape. Troll Slayers, don't know if they used up all of their ammunition necessarily, but they'll still be very good against URUK-HAI infantry with that armour piercing. Getting surrounded such as they are though by some raiders will not be amazing for them. They would appreciate some reinforcements, I'm sure. It looks as though they are going to get it. Arthedain taking the lead a little bit more so with this. Some upgraded men-at-arms coming in. They will be certainly the sort of thing which will be able to overcome URUK-HAI raiders in melee. Gates on the other side now. It's about time they also fell. Some trolls climbing down from the walls now. What else have we got going on? The hobbits less eager to jump down now. They are rousing, as you would expect. Still not particularly quick on the uptake over here. As I said, a unified assault makes it very difficult for the attackers, but so far it hasn't really been unified. The hobbits going in a little bit far ahead. Darthy Darth's Cardolan army only now just starting to poke their heads into the settlement proper. Over on the other side we'll start to see the pressure cranked up a little bit, I would suggest. What are the bandits going to be going after? These half-orcs are in full view, I suppose, so you may as well try and be as efficient as you possibly can. The trolls moving forward, I mean this is a problem as well. I mean what sort of units do they have directly that can deal with these trolls? Nothing really. I mean the sharpshooters would be the best thing in melee and they don't want to be caught against trolls either. Meanwhile, speaking of trolls coming back to engage with these units and are now coming through the main gate, the Minhiriath spearmen involved against some Snaga, some infantry. Those trolls will make life a lot more difficult for the Minhiriath. Meanwhile, Cardolan's skin of the bandits, the brown bandits rather than the ones clad in black that the hobbits have. Yeah, they're going to overwhelm that singular unit of URUK-HAI infantry. Another wall will fall. Like I said, that's a worthy use of the catapult ammunition because it will make these initial defences from the defenders fall apart just that little bit more quickly. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle, which is actually somewhat surprising given that they are on the receiving end of those pikemen. Still URUK-HAI positioned in the streets in behind the defences they've decided to take up on the walls, so they can reinforce as and when needed. URUK-HAI infantry there. The trolls still engaging in this counter-attack, and of course the dawdling that's going on here does mean that each twang of those archer bowstrings in those arrow towers is going to be ratcheting up more and more of a kill count as time goes along. Again, it's never going to be too significant, but any unnecessary loss here may prove to be decisive later on. We'll have to wait and see. Still the bandits trying to ignore the trolls, which is a bold move. They killed off a few powerful spear guards, but nothing too significant. Meanwhile, Froggy getting more units up on the wall, this time Longbottom mob. We might see some half-orcs go to try and deal with them. There's only 32 of them left after all, but the siege tower is now in place for another assault. No renewed efforts from the hobbits elsewhere after the hobbitry in arms was sent packing. That, as a counter-attack, is rather an unfortunate thing. You can see that this is where the catapult crew were, and the attempts from Isengard to assassinate the catapult finally come to fruition. I don't think it matters too much. I think 3 holes in the wall, a couple of hits into the URUK-HAI infantry. The catapult has done, I think, the bare minimum to be worthwhile from an attacking perspective. And even so, any ammunition that it would have had left now, no longer a problem, I think. Unless the crew was retreated again, it's kind of hard to tell. But loss of the general from Cardolan is significant. When they're on the attack and being forced to move forwards, low morale in the late game could really prove to be a problem, and it's definitely worth trading a unit of URUK-HAI Reavers for, I think. Whether that was intentional, I think they were going after the catapult crew more than the general, but I think actually the general is the more significant loss from Cardolan here, or it could be by the time the late game comes around. Meanwhile, URUK-HAI pikes gaining the upper hand now, with the troll slayers having to do more and more of the heavy lifting. The mercenaries, upon hearing the loss of the general already, routing starting to take shape within the attackers' ranks. Arthedain man-at-arms are routing off. They need to be a little bit more willing to commit more units in here, I think, because so far they're being a bit limp-wristed with their assaults. The troll slayers are a significant unit, but other than that we've seen nothing but basic units being committed in small quantities, and that's allowing Isengard to be a little bit more aggressive with their defence here, counter-attacking as they are. And I mean, trolls are easily going to be able to destroy a lot of Evandem spearmen, especially with the backup of URUK-HAI infantry. This is something to keep bearing in mind as the battle goes on. Lumbermen moving forwards. They'll be a little bit better against the trolls, of course, but they are also going to be pretty bad at keeping themselves alive against trolls and infantry. Trying to utilise their archers now. URUK-HAI Reavers among the more vulnerable units that you can go after in the Isengard roster. A few of the troll slayers left, but not many now. Mark and his troll slayers also taking hits from the Isengard crossbows. The rest of these units biding their time and waiting. I mean, they are using the gaps in the wall to good effect, the attackers, but not necessarily for an attack just yet. They're using them more to try and whittle the enemy down with their ranged units first and foremost. Bandits, I mean, what are the crossbows going after? How you use your ammunition as the defenders is absolutely vital. And for Isengard, that means your crossbows have to be used to the best possible cause, and I guess going after Minhiriath sharpshooters and being engaged in a crossbow duel is one such thing. It's kind of almost Napoleonic, the battle that's taking shape over here, actually, with the crossbows shooting at one another in lines. I mean, Isengard do use drums, so half-orc spear guard, yeah, they are going to clean up the Longbottom mob that are on the walls, but they may find themselves surrounded. Again, nothing of any genuine quality being sent forward. These are all units that Darth clearly doesn't mind losing because they're all basic Greenway units, but he's going to lose them without anything gained if they don't send something at least capable of holding the assault together. And that is most certainly not going to be the case here if it's only Greenway units. Greenway units are reasonably resilient for what they are, but you need something of genuine quality in and amongst them, otherwise they're just going to get outclassed in melee like anything they fight, especially against a faction with good quality infantry like Isengard. I mean, Half-Orc Spearguard and URUK-HAI pikemen together will be more than comfortable when it comes to dealing with these Greenways. Still nothing else happening over here. Very dense collection of Minotaur Romain gatekeepers now up on the walls. Guards of Orthanc moving forward with URUK-HAI infantry to try and sandwich more of these Cardolan units between them. 31 spearmen routing off as a result. Again, perhaps another example of Cardolan's morale already being compromised. Thieves of Tharbad are there. Civilians. Guards of Orthanc going after the Thieves of Tharbad now. Again, these assassin class units can be damaging, but I think the difficulty of use with them in the current patch is such that I would rarely pick them myself. More Arthedainian units moving forward here. Arthedain men-at-arms. URUK-HAI Reavers already shaken. Some Troll Slayers still alive, amazingly enough, but the treatment the Reavers got at the hands of the archers has softened them up enough to the point where the Arthedain infantry will be just fine against them. They have managed to push through this section of wall as well. Evendim spearmen leading the way over here. Crossbows being forced to block their advance. Snaga skirmishers are there. Still the URUK-HAI infantry blocking the gatehouse as well, but as time goes on here, you're starting to see the two Arthedain armies and Wound Raiders Cardolan force start to push Isengard back. That's not necessarily the worst thing for Isengard, as long as it's a controlled retreat and they limit the transitional phase the attackers have access to. I think they'll be just fine. URUK-HAI crossbows, ready in positions, doing a lot of damage already, really. Further over here, Harrow Towers continue to do their thing. Froggy's army repositioning itself. Still not a huge amount of progress made over here, as you would expect. Some bandits are there. The Minhiriath units are a little bit more capable of looking after themselves, but sharpshooters are there. Half-Orc Spearguard claiming victory up on the walls. It's not been a particularly successful assault for the Hobbits and Cardolan over here. It's not been disastrous because of the fact they haven't actually committed all that much to melee just yet. We have to say Tommy the Wise is probably feeling very good about the amount of units he's been able to kill off while still maintaining a good defensive position. Minhiriath sharpshooters, you can see though, doing some good damage to these Half-Orc Spearguard that are in position. They're shaken, they're taking a lot of damage themselves as well, presumably as a result of enemy crossbows, but just need to do a little bit more damage while they still can. Over here, meanwhile, on the more successful side of things for the attackers, Minhiriath spearmen caught behind enemy lines, rather. Morale slightly stabilising a little bit there. Perhaps as a result of the crossbow bolts they have now got raining down from on high. Javelins as well, so these Guards of Orthanc aren't going to particularly enjoy the treatment they're being given. Another unit of Guards of Orthanc as well, blocking the infantry from getting in over here, although I say infantry, again, Greenway units and civilians, but there's not very many of those Guards of Orthanc left now, though. Things getting a little bit more chaotic for the defenders, and so far you have to say, use of the javelins, the fact they've got these crossbowmen up on the walls is a pretty significant thing as well. They've already started doing a lot of damage to Isengard. I mentioned at the start of the fight, getting crossbows up onto the walls if you're the attackers is a real problem for the defenders. It's the sort of damage you can't really afford to take. I mean, the Guards of Orthanc should clear up these Minhiriath sharpshooters, to be fair, but it has already begun. I mean, let's be fair though, the Isengard crossbows have also been doing a pretty good job as well, inflicting pretty deep wounds on the attackers as they try to make their way through the town. And still not a huge amount of progress has been made. Arthedain pikemen now moving forward, alongside the Evendim spearmen and some Merc guildsmen trying to anchor themselves in position. It's it's not the cleanest front line that Isengard have at the moment, but if they can get a few crossbow bolts in here, they'll once again send the enemy packing. As you can see here, Mercenary Guildsmen routing once more. The morale situation for Cardolan isn't great. Even Arthedain have got a few units of their more entry-level militia spears shaken. Arthedain marksmen moving forward. Dunedain Rangers now within the town as well. URUK-HAI Berserkers on the way forward to maybe try and catch the Rangers out, but a couple of volleys would not go amiss, and there's a lot of ground for them to make up. Yeah, this is exactly the thing I mentioned at the start of the battle as well. If the attackers can utilise their Rangers in any capacity that's considered effective, it's something else that the defenders are going to be really feeling. And yeah, those URUK-HAI Berserkers, you can see the problem the Berserkers have with their armour there. Even with their hit points, the Rangers simply carving through them. I mean, in melee they should still be okay, but the Rangers can simply back up a little bit. Another unit of Berserkers being sent forward as well, so trying to use this armour-piercing damage to good effect, which will be the case, to be fair, against these Minhiriath units. A few Arthedainians that are over here as well. I mean, Arthedain marksmen don't stand a chance against Berserkers in melee, of course. But yes. Tommy the Wise sending over some of his units over here. Defeat is a distinct possibility for the Minhiriath. Still Longbottom Mob trying to act in support, but that isn't going to go too well for them either. Actually, they're just going to completely ignore the Longbottom Mob and simply try and surround and rout the Minhiriath spears that are making up the spearhead of this assault so far. Proudfoot Protectors being sent up onto the walls, presumably. Excuse me. Come on, boys, don't fail me now. Presumably they wanted to use their crossbows from up here, but I mean, this is only really would have been viable if the Half-Orc Spearguard weren't already here blocking the ability to do so. And between them and the arrow towers, we're maybe seeing the loss of a unit of Proudfoot Protectors here, which would be a real tragedy for the attackers moving on to the later stages of this fight. And they still have reinforcements over here as well, so it's really, I think, the Hobbits and Cardolan over there are only really going to start to make genuine inroads over there when the attack over here starts to come to fruition, and Tommy the Wise kind of has to pull back. But even over here, his reinforcements have arrived. I mean, with Dunedain Rangers up there, that is going to be a bit of a concern. Minotaur and Gatekeeper is going to get some assistance from some Arthedain men-at-arms. More units coming in through the walls as well. But between URUK-HAI infantry and pikes, again, it's coming down to a lot of this fight is of course going to be determined by how effectively the ranged units are being utilised, and it's a little bit more difficult to keep track of that than it is the shifting front lines. Still, Isengard says victory seems certain for them. I mean, there's dismounted Fornos Knights that have been committed to the fight over here, so that's going to be a more significant challenge for Isengard in melee. Nars-Kai, though, Arthedain will be leaning pretty heavily on their pikes to try and keep the Nars-Kai at bay, but I do appreciate how the defenders are front-loading their defence here. They are contesting anything the attackers try to do. This may come back to haunt them later on when they don't have enough left in the tank for a final stand that's successful, but it makes for a far more interesting battle to watch than if they just capitulated at the first sign of trouble on the outer layer and started to move backwards into singular choke points. We've already seen a fair few of them of late. Few seem certain only a military genius could win this battle. The support from those rangers and crossbows up on the wall, with more and more infantry being committed to the fight as well. A bit of armour piercing from the lumbermen will also be provided. Lurtz is hunting back. I mean, the defenders have got their own body-piercing projectiles, which they could use to good effect. Surprised they haven't already done so, to be honest. Still, I mean, what do they actually have left? Are they only going to have bodyguard tier units left at this rate? Yeah, Dunedain Captains, Gatekeepers, Starvard Warhammers. All of their rank and file will be thrown under the bus with nothing to show for it, really. The Hobbits starting to try and contest the walls again, which I mean is something. Attacking on multiple fronts is going to be the way, I think. But still, Cardolan sending forward. I mean, Minhiriath men-at-arms are perfectly serviceable in melee, but I mean, the problem here is Isengard are anchored in place with pikes, and they still have the support of archers and crossbowmen in behind, which is going to continue to do an awful lot of damage to the units Cardolan have. And I mean, you may say, well, that's why he's not committing forward his elite units, but earlier he did have the opportunity, I think, alongside the hobbits, to be a little bit more all-in. But as of now, I think all he needs to do is keep the fires of that attack stoked and wait for his allies to start having the desired effect over here, and then his bodyguard units may well come into play in the very late game. That will be the great hope for them, I'm sure. I mean, here we have spearmen there, moving forward. A few more crossbow bolts were forthcoming against those URUK-HAI infantrymen. But yes, this assault has finally borne fruit. They could move through that road as well, maybe cutting Tommy the Wise off. Lumbermen getting hit. Those lurts hunting back up on the walls do need to be a bit careful, because now getting attacked in melee is very much on the cards. A few remnants of these units over here, but this attack over here is actually falling apart, with more of Scouts' units being sent forward. Arthedain are being forced backwards, so while it is going slightly better for the attackers in some sections of the fortress, you certainly couldn't say the same for this one. More dismounted Fornos knights being applied to the situation, but they're going to need more than individual units, which is something I've been saying a little bit too often for my liking from the attackers at this point. If this continues to be the case and they do end up losing the fight, I know what I'm going to be blaming it on. Bandits. URUK-HAI infantry are here. Defeat seems certain as Cardolan. I mean, a little bit of momentum here for the Cardolan force, trying to go to the aid of their allies on the other side, give them a way into the fortress. Lurt's hunting pack now moving back to try and avoid being caught in melee. Still, I mean, these are only URUK-HAI archer volleys, but still support is forthcoming for the URUK-HAI that are defending this section of the fortress. Some farmers of Buckland with them in Minhiriath spearmen, and armour piercing is what is going to be needed to get through that URUK-HAI armour. What else have we got? Minhiriath sharpshooters moving forward. Can they finally clear out a spot on the wall? Half-orc spear guards still. It may seem like a relatively inconsequential engagement, this, but they've made life far more annoying for the attackers to get a unit of crossbows up onto the walls here, and we saw how effective that could be in the other part of the fortress, where the Wound Raider was able to get his units up there, and they was able to do a lot of damage to the Isengard defenders in that section of the castle as a result. You can see the pebbles being thrown by Longbottom Mob. Not a huge amount of reinforcements ready to be committed forward now, you'd have to say, so I think that's your lot for the outer walls. I think you're going to have to make do with what you have, numbers-wise. Tommy the Wise does have his guards of Orthanc over here, which are stopping any further movement of Cardolan fairly effectively, you'd have to say. Kai being sent forward, so again another example of Isengard moving forwards, trying to take the fight to the enemy, but I think on this occasion maybe it's not going to go quite so well for them. You have two units of Warns of the North which can set up a nice crossfire against them, so this is an example where Isengard's aggression is going to come back to haunt them, I fancy. Even so, it is indicative of the way Isengard have approached this battle overall. Arthedain men-at-arms still struggling over here, Arthedain, to really gain any sort of ground against the Isengard defenders. Isengard very willing to send reinforcements in, got support from the Lurt's hunting pack and the URUK-HAI crossbows. This section of the fortress, this road up here, is very often where we used to see the defenders lay a beating down, but it was usually further up the hill. They usually let the attackers in before really doing that. Here though, they've got things underway a little bit earlier. Annuminas Gate Guards trying to move forward again. It's only individual units. There's some Troll Slayers to help even things out, but do they have any more to be given, I should say? Arthedain Marksmen, they do have some more dismounted Knights of Annuminas. There's still Dunedain Scouts, which, with the Champions of the White Hand now no longer really a fixture in the fight, can only really be used as fast-moving regular archers. URUK-HAI crossbowmen shooting into the backs of these units over here, and as a result, these units are routing off. Again, echoes of the Wound Raider's general being killed early on. Cardolan being made to suffer for that. Elsewhere. Balance of forces evenly matched. Do we have any high quality units on hand? Still, I think the answer is no. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. Banderbrass archers firing away. URUK-HAI are going to be able to absorb arrow fire decently well, but still. Hobbitry and arms moving forward, presumably to block the surrounding of the front line again. This is not the first time that Isengard have elected to do this. Go along the walls and then attack this position from behind. The Hobbits actually just adding themselves to the front line as well. I mean, this has gone... It's not gone great for the attackers over here, you have to say. If you seem certain, only a military genius could win this battle, allegedly. Banderbrass archers throwing their payload as well. URUK-HAI archers shimmying along the walls. And URUK-HAI crossbowmen stand and wait. Bandits. Is this a counter-attack? It is from Isengard. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of such a thing is from scouts. I mean, I guess maybe it's just a last hurrah trying to do some damage, but the Winged Swordsman has a decent amount of units left in the tank, and so any units that get sent outside the relative safety of the walls at this point are simply going to be surrounded and destroyed. Javelins being tossed in, expediting the process of destroying these URUK-HAI now. Arthedain pikeman victory seems certain. Especially with the support of those Dunedain scouts. I mean, that's the thing as well. Going out into the open field at this point gives DF Mark the opportunity to use his scouts more effectively. URUK-HAI crossbowmen in place. Wardens of the North still doing their thing. Yeah, Dunedain scouts shooting at the URUK-HAI crossbowmen kind of point blank. And elsewhere... Still resistance being put up on the gatehouse. A weird kind of fight so far. URUK-HAI crossbowmen defeat is a distinct possibility for Tommy the Wise at this point. It's taken a long time for Cardolan to get to the point where this is a possibility, but they are finally starting to push back against the Isengard resistance in this section of the fortress. What else do we have? Victory seems certain. More hobbits finally getting up onto the walls with no resistance now. URUK-HAI crossbows are there, there's still berserkers. I mean, there are still units in reserve, but at this point I really do think they'll be best off pulling back to the town centre and making their stand there. Dunedain scouts able to get in behind enemy lines once more, helping to finish off what resistance remains here. Need to be careful of friendly fire actually against those Dunedain troll slayers. More Isengard units being sent down. Diego Rio Ramos using the URUK-HAI infantry to block the advance of the dismounted Knights of Illuminus. Don't want to be allowing them to get into melee with the URUK-HAI crossbowmen after all. How much do they have left? I mean, because looking at the defences over here, Lurt's hunting pack, more pikes, more crossbows. Don't know how much ammunition they have left in these various units. Probably not a huge amount, but enough to be a concern. They still have a catapult, they still have more Nazkai. So Isengard still have a force to be reckoned with. I'm not sure if the attackers have got the overwhelming numbers that would be required. Tommy the Wise has also been able to now turn around his Guards of War tank, having already dealt with the flanking move from the Wound Raider, and that is, once again, causing real problems for Cardolan. A genuinely extremely difficult unit to bring down. Finally we're seeing some bodyguard units, so I mean Dunedain captains will certainly help with matters. Vanderbrass archers firing away against the Lurtz hunting pack. I mean, this is actually a more efficient engagement for the hobbits, to be honest. Tommy the Wise doesn't want to be losing his Lurtz hunting pack so easily. Those body-piercing projectiles could yet prove to be the difference maker, but the hobbits already swarming over the walls now. What Froggy was hoping to do in the very early stages, he is now doing here. What little remains of the Womb Raiders, Rangers doing their thing, also a depleted unit of crossbows. The small amounts of damage these various units are capable of doing may yet prove to be extremely important. URUK-HAI infantry, meanwhile, able to catch some Rangers napping. There are also Wards of the North here, though, and it doesn't really matter if you catch them napping. They will turn around and beat the living daylights out of you. Dismounted Fornos Knights coming forward now, however. Yeah, these URUK-HAI infantry are almost certainly going to rout as a result of their attentions. Further afield, Wardens of the North firing away. Defeat seems certain, only a military genius could win this battle. Defeat is a distinct possibility, etc., etc. What else have we got going on? Excuse me, hay fever. That sneeze was building for a few seconds there. Isengard's still defending on the front foot. Like I said, this could end up being their downfall ultimately, but it's certainly an admirable way to approach the battle. Untitled Troll Slayers still throwing their javelins in. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle, allegedly. Dismounted Fornos Knights. Snaga skirmishers also doing their thing. Still with ammunition and URUK-HAI crossbows, so I mean this has been a constant problem. I did mention at the start of the battle it may very well come down to who's able to use their ranged units more effectively. Difficult to tell, but based on the movement on this front line over here, you have to say that Isengard certainly haven't used their ammunition poorly. It's just a case of whether or not they have enough of it at this stage to be able to do the business. I mean, they're doing a lot of damage there, though, to Arthedain. The hobbits moving forward. Good opportunity to claim some ground in the settlement now. Ironically enough, it's the Cardolan and hobbit armies over here which are going to be able to move further into the settlement more quickly, but then again, they are further away from the town centre anyway, so was always likely to be the case. Minotaur gatekeepers, Tharvad Warhammers, more Dunedain captains, so a lot of good quality units, and not a small army either, but you will see. We'll see if it can be effective as the battle continues. Those Wardens of the North have been trying to counter-skirmish against those URUK-HAI crossbows on high, but they are a little bit depleted, and the crossbows doing the right thing by ignoring them for the most part and going after the infantry lines. Tiny flanking force here for the URUK-HAI crossbows, which will be soundly dealt with by the dismounted Fornos Knights. And I mean, technically speaking, the attackers are on top by 2 percentage points. And going into the late stages, the defenders generally need a lead in order to win out in the long run, but remember they still have artillery, they do still have skirmishers which can make up that difference, so it's not quite so cut and dry on this occasion, I think. And you can see they are already kind of preparing a bit of a final stand. Tommy the Wise's Guards of Orthanc still alive. Most impressive from them. So really the battle is only raging still over here, and it's more a case of how much damage can Isengard do to Arthedain before they have to defend the town centre. That is the only question left to us. Nazkai moving in. Getting into melee now. I mean, this is a big commitment as well from Scouts of Entertainment, so they clearly feel as though they could just outright win over here if they're willing to commit a unit like the Nazkai here rather than save them for the final stand. They corridor of death here, you'd have to say, from both factions contributing to it, but yeah. Further afield, Guards of Orthanc. Still some URUK-HAI crossbows. Maybe they still have ammunition if they're positioning themselves like that, rather than as fodder on the front line. The fact they still have pikes is significant as well, because it means they can at least attempt to hold the enemy at arm's length. Are the Cardolan player, or is the Cardolan player here, Darthy Darth, and the Hobbit army going to attack before their allies are ready, or are they going to, yeah, go this way? I was going to say this is the best thing to do. Help to expedite your allies' movement through the settlement. You can see here that Dismounted Knights of Numenor, finally they've got up onto this wall and they're thinking about surrounding this front line, or at least going after those URUK-HAI crossmen who have almost certainly ratcheted up a very, very nice kill count for themselves now. Victory is going to be the attackers on this front line eventually. It's just a case of how much carnage they can wreak. I mean, again, I feel as though committing those Nazkai was actually a bit of a mistake. It should have been the kind of unit saved for later, because this is already kind of a doomed situation. Whereas the fight for the town centre is not necessarily doomed just yet for the defenders, but the Arthedain marksmen here showering the URUK-HAI crossbows in arrow fire. See here, Lurt's hunting pack doing their thing, shooting into the hobbits as they advance, forcing them essentially to go on to the attack now. They are going to retreat as a result of that. Now then, back down here. Victory is a distinct possibility. Dismounted Knights of Numenor moving forwards, taking hits as well as they do so. Dismounted Fornos Knights are there. Dunedain Rangers continuing to fire away as well. Not many Warns of the North left, so maybe the URUK-HAI crossbowmen did turn themselves onto them at some point. I mean, the Dismounted Knights of Numenor is trying to push through, but this is a fight they won't like, and this is a fight they won't particularly enjoy. 1-to-1 against the Nazkai. It's a bit of a chaotic situation, but this is as close as you will find to an isolated fight in a siege battle like this. More units going down, the URUK-HAI crossbowmen presumably out of ammunition, so they're going to try and help kill off the Knights of Numenor while they still can, but the Cardolan reinforcements have arrived. It's come at the exact moment where the lines were falling anyway, to be fair, but oh well. It is what it is. Defeat is a distinct possibility. Foot protectors to there, Arthedain marksmen getting into position, so still ranged units in support. And finally, this Isengard assault will, well, it technically is an assault because it was a counter-assault down the hill, but finally, the defenders will be broken in all areas except from the town centre, and we shall see if the attackers still have enough left in the tank to dislodge them from there, or if the Isengard damage that's been done has been substantial enough to give them victory in the long run. It means all of their aggressive counter-attacks will have been vindicated. Hits in the back of the Nazkai. Some Dunedain Rangers up here. I mean, the assault is technically already underway, more out of necessity from the hobbits than anything else, but yeah, these hobbitry in arms are obviously going to be absolutely eviscerated by URUK-HAI berserkers and Nazkai backed up by pikemen. The catapult is in place. They're going after, I think, the Minhiriath sharpshooters. I do think if the defenders are going to win this, it will be on the backs of their artillery doing the work. We've already seen the attacking artillery utilised after all. Yeah, and at point blank like this, the artillery is scarcely going to miss, and that was a huge amount of damage done very, very quickly to a unit which is ultimately extremely dangerous to the defenders. I mean, part of the problem they have is they've got several units of crossbows, and of course Cardolan, as much as I don't agree with wrapping your elite units in cotton wool and saving them for the end, that is exactly what Darthy Darth has done, and he's got a lot of elite units back here as a result, so Isengard are going to have to try and find a way of dealing with them. More Proudfoots. Isengard's still clinging on for dear life over here. An impressive last stand, to be sure. dismounted 4 Nosterine Knights. Been given a bit of a hard time of it in this battle, you'd have to say. Troll Slayers. Victory almost a certainty. And here we have Men-at-Arms advancing down the hill. Thud of artillery. I think going after the Proudfoots, but actually as a result of the terrain they have got a little bit of cover, interestingly enough. Those Menhiriats are leaving. There goes one of the Arthedain generals, as well as, in very close proximity, one of the Isengard generals. And that will be Scouts' general, who has fallen. A few pebbles being utilised. I mean, what is the situation with the catapult crew? Still perfectly healthy. Oof. Yeah, they're in the perfect position, really. It's actually more difficult for the catapult to hit them than you would initially think. They're getting hit now by Lert's hunting pack though, and also a counter-attack from infantry is on the cards. That will probably be the army from Scouts. Yes, Diego and Tommy are the only ones with anything left. I certainly wouldn't call the efforts of any of the Isengard armies on this occasion cowardly, however. But the announcer can do as he pleases, I suppose. Untitled Scouts are here, Proudfoot Protectors being surrounded by many units. I think actually this might be a moment for ×2 speed, to be honest, because we're still waiting for the main assault to get underway. There's actually not that many frames left in this fight either, so we may be seeing a quick all-in-one style assault, and I do think based on those elite units that Carbon still have left with the other numbers, it's going to be still the gap is at 2%, so Isengard, in spite of their heroics earlier on, only managed to maintain the current gap. But yes, as I was saying, those elite units I think are going to be too much of a problem, and also the catapult now too far out in front. If they still have ammunition, that really is the final nail in the coffin. Going around to the other side, shooting with their ranged units into the TC. The Proudfoot Protectors also now moving in as a result, as we can return to 1 speed. I mean, Proudfoot Protectors do need a little bit of support here. That's been something that Froggy has had to contend with pretty much this entire battle. He sent units in and then sort of looked around, and he's been all alone facing a superior foe. Are we going to see the elite units finally committed from Darthy Darth? I think we are. It's about damn time. One of my pet peeves is seeing a cluster of bodyguard tier units not utilised until the end of the battle. They haven't been punished for it on this occasion, the attackers, but they could have been. It's definitely not the right way of doing things. URUK-HAI, there's still some Lert's hunting pack over there. Several small and depleted units, as well as the healthier Hearthguard of Amon Sul still able to fire into the Isengard ranks, as the Hobbitry and Arms flee the field. Berserkers would probably be the unit I'd be going after. Berserkers and Pikes, because they're the most vulnerable to this kind of attack, and still a very dangerous foe to have to fight. Hearthguard of Amon Sul. Here we go then. This is going to be it. Strong application of force, and I mean it is mostly Darthy Darth that is left, you'd have to say. I mean, he's the one with by far the most strength of all the attacking armies remaining. A few hits on the approach, but this is a lot of damage coming Isengard's way now. I mean, especially from something like Tharbad Warhammers. The armour piercing is something which is going to be effective against the URUK-HAI which remain. A few arrows finding their way through. URUK-HAI crossbowmen, Nazkai moving forwards as well. That's hunting pack. Managed to remount the catapult though, which is, if they can use the catapult here and get some point blank shots, that could be the thing which turns this battle on its head. But they're not going to have much time to do that with, because I'd imagine that the catapult crew is going to be one of the things that attracts the attention of all the archers. Are they going to be able to do so there? I don't know. They're going to need it to. They simply don't have the quality in melee here. Dunedain captains and Tharbad warhammers, Wardens of the North, all the best of the Dunedain really, as far as the eye can see. And as strong as the URUK-HAI are, they're certainly not here in enough numbers to withstand this. And there's a whole firing line in behind there as well, including gatekeepers. That unit of crossbows honestly might make it so that even with the catapult, I don't know if Isengard are going to be able to be victorious here. Another one of those elite units which Darth saved for the end. Gatekeeper's able to shoot into the backs of these units very effectively. That's hunting pack rolling around. Feet seems certain. And yeah, I mean, this is going to be... the end of the battle is now upon us. And it was a sterling effort from Isengard, but ultimately it is going to be an attack of victory, and Arnor will be able to reclaim this town of theirs. It comes at a great cost, but Saruman will be hearing news of a great defeat, I fear. Go back up to ×2 speed, I think, here. Hunting back just being thrown in. The gatekeepers are there. Yeah. A good fight nonetheless, though. I am feeling a little bit groggy today, in case you can't tell. But this battle feels fresh because of the fact we haven't seen any of the standard settlements in a long time. If it had been a battle on Bersergath, I probably would have been less enthused. But it is what it is. I think we will be seeing Bersergath upcoming again. I do still have a replay on it, which Winged Swordsman sent me, which I will be getting to within the next couple of weeks, I think. Still a lot of damage being done from all quarters. Isengard not going down easily. I suppose this is to be expected with the crossbows now moving around. Standard archers not going to be able to do the business quite so easily against the URUK-HAI. Yeah, the Isengard generals falling by the wayside now, and in the end the early loss of that Cardolan general and the slightly disjointed nature of some of the attacking moves not enough to snatch a victory away from the attackers here. The defenders always have it all to do, and I really appreciated their aggressive style here, but one too many times I think they were a bit over aggressive, leaving the walls later on, committing URUK-HAI where they shouldn't, that sort of thing. Again, it's in the spirit of how they were playing the battle. But, you know, ultimately it wasn't really how victory was going to be theirs. 6% the difference in the end in favour of the attackers. Like I said, Arnor reclaiming their settlement. And yeah, I don't think the defenders played badly by any means. They played aggressively, which is always nice to see from defenders, to be honest. But in the end, a little bit too aggressively in parts, and it's always going to be difficult. Like, the attackers are always going to have an edge when it's a 5v3, and especially when you saw, you know, crossbows and rangers and even Wardens of the North being used fairly well by the attackers. Like, the defenders used their skirmishers very well, but so too did the attackers. And obviously for the attackers, they're always going to get a little bit more out of certain plays than the defenders. So it is what it is, but let's see what did the damage for both of the Cardolan armies. You can see how conservative Darth was being based on the fact that he did get the fewest amount of kills by quite a long way. And the Wound Raider, kind of the opposite really. He was the first attacking army to really be rendered useless, but he was aggressive early on, and so he ended up getting the most amount of kills as a result. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers for the Wound Raider up on the walls with the Sharpshooters doing very nicely. The Dunedain Rangers also. If an attacking army is getting over 300 kills with their Rangers, you're giving yourself an awful lot to do as the defenders. Over 100 kills on a unit of Minhiri out as well. The rest all relatively standard, as you would expect. As for Darth, I mean, one of his units getting over 100 kills was the Minhiri out Men-at-Arms, so a unit that was committed slightly earlier against the Isengard defenders in that corner of the fortress he was responsible for, but the rest not really having the opportunity to get a ton of kills because they were only committed very late on. Which is another reason perhaps why you should commit bodyguard units earlier, because if you commit them late on, it looks like they didn't actually perform as well as they could have done. But Of course, it was just the fact they weren't actually committed until later. So yeah, big thank you to the Womb Raider for sending this one to me. Big thank you to all of the players as well for being a part of a battle replay on a map that we haven't seen in quite some time, and it's certainly a very nostalgic fortress layout, this one. I'm sure that Scouts will do this on his channel as well, seeing as he was a part of this battle replay. It's been a very long time actually since I did a battle with Scouts in it. So yeah, that's another thing that is fresh and not, well, I was going to say new, but that's not accurate, is it? Fresh. We'll just leave it at that. As for what's coming up next, the very next thing that will be coming out will be another knockout tourney battle. Actually, I've already recorded it. It's already actually uploaded to YouTube at this point. It will come out shortly after this one, and it will be the shielded infantry, or the line infantry, as it were. So that will be something which will make a return at long last. I know that that one, people wanted me to continue that series after the test, really, that was the Lance Cavalry, and I did mean to, but obviously with being sent away several times, it's sort of got in the way of things. But we are getting back on track now, and that will be the next battle, next video to come out after this one. As for future battles, there will be a Mountain Citadel Siege, which will be evil on the defence once again, like I said. Bit of a theme emerging with the next couple of sieges, with evil being the ones to try and defend against good. There is also, like I mentioned, a Bersergath battle as well, which I'll try and push back as far as I can, to be honest, seeing as it is a map that we've seen time and time again, but it will be coming out at some point in the next couple of weeks. And also, I've got a replay from Filler, which is a little bit of an interesting one because it's kind of a pitch and a siege battle all at the same time. So that's something else that we will be seeing and having a look at and casting our gaze on in the next couple of weeks also. So that's kind of the loose plan. Also, maybe the live stream channel update can happen within June. I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, things still rather tumultuous, and I can only really explain what's going to be going on when I have a little bit more of a concrete idea. But anyway, enough rambling. Really, and for the most part, it's just business as usual. Once again, big thank you to all the players. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.